All right. Islam to all the viewers and Islam to all the Moors that's currently in the study session. I appreciate you all for tuning in and building with Meru. Uh, today's video or today's study session will be over the Wazir Regional Council, in which we had a study session over yesterday, but unfortunately the video was not saved. Um, so this document touches base on um, the Wazir Regional Council. It touches base on diplomatic relations. It touches base on consular relations, etc. So there's a few things in this document that will bring quite a few avenues to light. This document will also explain certain seats of office, such as the consul general or the mufti, right? So the Wazir Regional Council. Now, this section that I'm about to read from is called the whereas section. You see, before it's chapter 1, you have this section called the whereas section. This whereas section is basically where all the paragraphs where you see bearing in mind, believing, realizing, acknowledging, affirming, emphasizing, convinced, reaffirming, solemnly, right? This is all basically, as it says, reaffirming. This is giving you the background, the jurisprudence of this document. This is telling you what this document gets its power from or what it's based on. Okay. Um, so let's read a few things from this whereas section. It says, bearing in mind, and I'm just starting with this paragraph, random paragraphs. I'm not reading the whole document, where it says, bearing in mind that the Wazir Regional Council and its recognized member states shall be guided by the norms of treaties and international law, with a view to preserving the purpose and principles concerning the sovereign equality in modern Moroccan states, and the maintenance of international peace and security. Okay, so it's this is about peace and security. Okay, this document, you'll see the different avenues of security that are to be exercised. Security is important, and I'm gonna further explain as we read why it's one of the first things we have to establish laws
Islam.
based on security. Islam. Did you have a question or a comment?
Now, I was just ready to get into the security aspect because I realize it's very important.
Okay, yes, indeed. So we continue to read, skipping down over a paragraph, um, realizing that the purpose of such diplomatic intercourse, privileges, and immunities is not to benefit individuals, but to ensure that the efficient performance of the functions of the diplomatic relations and consular relations by respecting the principles of Moroccan law as binding on native Moroccans and privileged Americans. So, for one, as this section says, it's about diplomatic intercourse, privileges and immunities, right? So diplomatic relations. And it goes on to say this is binding on native Moroccans and privileged Americans. So privileged, that's not the same as a right, right? Privileges and rights are not the same. But we see here privileged Americans. Now, wait a second. Why are they privileged when everybody has a nationality, right? And they have human rights? Why is this privileged all of a sudden? Well, it's because nobody is in the seat of office in the United States of America, and everybody has sworn, taken oaths to the corporation, United States. So when they're not in proper position and they choose to be corporate fictions, then you have exactly what basically our position was. What was our position? What is the position of the so-called Indians? Or I say, what was our position? More subjects. We couldn't exercise human rights because we wasn't set up right politically. So we have privileges, right? If you're not set up right as a national, you're set up as a subject. Why? We've been subjugated. That's why the term more subject is in the France versus United States case, France versus United States of America court case. They ID everybody who doesn't have a more state or not a part of a more state as more subjects and proteges, or people being protected by the American government, meaning they must follow the laws of that government because they don't have their own government. So privileged Americans, again, why? They choose to be United States corporation. They choose to identify with that and not the United States of America. Why are we calling them Americans? Because that's what the treaties say. We fell off our bike. When we picked it back up, we're using the exact terminology, right? So it goes to say, um, let's let's continue reading. Acknowledging that the Constitution for the United States of Morocco has yet to be concluded and enacted for the purpose of establishing a central government to represent the Moroccan Empire. Therefore, the WRC Council and the WRC Office of the Secretariat shall assist the member states until the Constitution of the United States of Morocco is convened into session. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. What do I mean by that? You see, United States of America. Well, this is not America. This is Morocco, right? United States of Morocco. That's what was chosen amongst the Moorish states. So has yet to be concluded. This Constitution has yet to be concluded. The United States of America have constitute. They have a constitution, right? Who else has a constitution? The so-called de facto states. So they have states that make up this one entity called the United States of America, right? Within an empire, what do you have? Modern time, you have states. Now, what did you see? As some of us may be familiar with old maps, numerous old maps, right? On some maps, 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago, maybe even further, you see the landmass doesn't have these colonized lines, these imaginary lines that makes what we call it today a state, right? In some maps you may see some of the lines, some of the states. Then you might see to the west of this landmass, there's no colonized line, right? Or you might see only a few, and they're much larger than they are today, right? Statehood itself, or states in general, has been around roughly for about 500, 600 years, something like that. This grew into being international law, just like the maps grew into being seen as states all within that setup throughout time. Now, even though it's a colonized thing, a lot statehood itself. How did statehood start off? Well, it started off because the European city states, was getting pressed by Moors, the Moroccan government, the Moroccan Empire, I should say. So they had to come together. Said, look, the enemy of the enemy is my friend, right? They had to come together and said, this is how we established unity. This is how we established peace, oneness, harmony, etc. Now, all while that started off from the jump, Moors were falling victim to their own egos. So while we were falling and while the empire was falling, what we quote unquote call the custodians was cleaning up shop, spiritually and physically, while we was falling victim to our own ego, right? So statehood is not a thing. We taught everybody law, Moors, right? So to argue and say statehood or some aspect of international law or whatever is against you, when Moors are the people who establish true law in every way, is contradicting. But statehood itself, regardless of whether you say a colonizer established a state somewhere unlawfully, etc., there is what's called a term, uti possidetis. This term, uti possidetis, has several cases in which basically throughout these several cases, you'll see that regardless of the colonizer's imaginary lines, it's still a fact that they're there, regardless of a truthful standpoint, etc. So what happens when that a fact is there? You got to handle with the facts on the table, right? And compare them with the truth. What was the truth? The truth was international law was forming, so there's very little to compare it with. It changed throughout time. It developed throughout time. So starting a government today wasn't the same as back then, way, way back then. It's a different setup. It's a different due process of law. So now, being that we must what learn from the European. Why? Because they're the quote unquote custodians. Why else? Because the way we was running government was I'll succeed the position of a sultan down to my son who may not even know government, which is not smart. And that's exactly how Morris was running the government. Now we talking about diplomatic relations, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talking about how Moors was establishing how they ran government, which is a theocratic government, meaning the religion was the head, right? You deal with religion, that was the head. But now we have what's called a separation of powers. That means three branches of government. It's not based on one person, etc., right? So what happened before we continue this document? Abdul Aziz. Why does Noble Drew Ali have Abdul Aziz in the beginning pages of the Holy Quran, Circle 7? I'll let somebody take a guess at that or speak on it if they know or whatever before I state it. If anybody wants to take a shot.
Can you repeat that? I missed the last ending of that question. You said.
Yeah. Uh, the question is, why did Noble Drew Ali put Abdul Aziz, who was the Sultan of Morocco in the early 1900s, late 1800s? Why did he put Abdul Aziz in the first few pages of the Holy Quran, Circle 7?
I want to say that was because in that time it wasn't no kingdom of Morocco at that time, so it was still back to the ancient times. So now it's kingdom of Morocco, but yeah, that's really my only guess to that because before the kingdom of the Morocco was not there. So yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Anybody else? Let's see if anybody else hopped in. Islam to everybody who just hopped in. I just unmuted everybody. So anybody else want to take a guess at that? Okay. Well, since this document is over diplomatic relations, right? And just as the brother stated, the Kingdom of Morocco was not formed in the early 1900s when Noble Drew Ali was around. So that means the Moroccan Empire was still running, right? They could still run and operate as a government, right? So we know that Noble Drew Ali went to several different continents, countries, right? How did he get there? Why did he have Abdul Aziz in the Holy Quran Circle 7? Well, when we consider the fact that he was at the Geneva Convention, which is means that you're moving as if you're a government official, but he wasn't a government official. What was he? He was a diplomat. He was a diplomatic agent, a diplomatic officer. Well, he wasn't an official, but he was a diplomatic agent. So when you are a diplomatic agent, you can be sent on missions on behalf of the state, right? At that time, they had a sultan to direct things for them, in which that in due time, what happened? Well, in 1906, the Act of Algiers came out. Article 121 says all states need constitutions. Why did they say all states need constitutions? Because within the Moroccan Empire, there were states, colonized or not. International law became a thing because statehood became a thing, which also made the Sultan no longer, because when you establish a state, you have heads of state who can control their own land, et cetera, right? The Sultan left us, not the one in 1906, Muhammad V in the 50s. So, and Muhammad VI is in office now for the Kingdom of Morocco. So, Noble Drew Ali moved as a diplomat. He didn't go speaking at the Geneva Convention on behalf of Moorish Scientific America. Even a lot of Moors in the temple would tell you that. So, how did he get there? He was a diplomat. So, when Noble Drew Ali posted a picture, took the picture, and the sign, the Moroccan flag was upside down. meaning the empire is in distress. We need help, right? Who else needed help? Who else was in distress? Abdul Aziz. Remember, an enemy of the enemy is my friend, right?
That's right.
Abdul Aziz and Noble Ali basically was looking at each other like, look, you are more in the Moroccan Empire, and I'm a more in the Moroccan Empire. If we don't work together, the empire gonna fall. If we don't do something about France, the empire is gonna fall. So while France was had their necks on the Sultan Abdul Aziz, basically because he asked for a loan and needed help real bad and didn't know how to spend the money, so he asked him for a loan as well as several other states. For one, France been in the picture besides that, but he asked for a loan, so now they have more say so. They have more, especially can't pay him back, can't meet the obligations, right? So there's natural reform happening. So while Sultan Abdul Aziz was getting pressed by France, trying to run because everybody over there didn't really rock with him, he pretty much by himself. Well, the only person that had a lending ear, not the only person, but Noble Ali. Why? Because the Sultan can do something, and he, even though it's kind of like the Joker, his life was in a sense like the Joker. His whole life was a joke. Nobody took him serious, right? Et cetera, et cetera. But it's that one fine line, that golden thread. If you know anything about uh, the Kabbalah or anything, or even Tarot cards, you know what I'm talking about. So this golden thread basically was the connection to our liberation. That Noble Ali basically, I forgot what the exact phrase was, but he took his thumb, had to go around his elbow, something. Basically, paraphrasing that he had to do the most just to establish a little bit. What he established, a religious organization in the colonizer's government, because that's the least we can do. Since they're the ones protecting us, we can learn a little bit, right? And then he said, I brought you everything. But guess what?
But
Everything
guess
ain't been
what?
told. Everything ain't been told. Everything has not been told, meaning he has not shared with you everything that needs to happen, everything that needs to be set up. Why? Because international law was still developing. There were certain things that didn't get established until after he transitioned. So how could he physically tell you the instructions if they have not been physically laid out?
That's
Right.
right.
So this is all the whole third or fourth generation understand and all that type of stuff. Because he couldn't tell you, or he couldn't set up everything that needed to be set up. We can't stop and settle at a religious organization incorporated in somebody else's so-called state. No, we need our own states because states are sovereign and independent. We don't need to be incorporated in nobody else's or amalgamate in nobody else's stuff, right? So, am I saying what Noble Ali did was wrong? No, he did what he could. He did what he could. He did what he was supposed to do because, again, statehood was not even established, truthfully, in a holistic sense. It was established to some degree. But for us to holistically get the point, nah. Today we have a whole description laid out. instructions, step by step. Back then, uh, that was still growing, developing. There was little help. So he did what he could, right? So let's step out to worship and step into scholarship, right? So let's continue this document. It says, finishing the whereas section. Um, it says, acknowledging that the Constitution for the United States of Morocco has yet to be concluded and enacted for the purposes. Did we read this? Okay, I believe I read that. Skip down to this section, emphasizing that the combined efforts of states to any dispute can be expressed through a joint declaration of intervention as erga omnes parties to help unite our efforts for a common defense of our independent states. Okay. I advise you to look up the term erga omnes. Okay, that's how, excuse me, when things are in a unified manner, like a class act, when everybody is on one page. In so many words, this was what erga omnes is about. Having the same understanding, moving on the same page about in a certain sphere. Okay. Um, so that's pretty much what I want to read from the whereas section. You can take away from uh, we can take away that the security, it's all about security. Privileged Americans is a term, a phrase, right? And we broke that down. Now let's go to chapter 1. Let's start with chapter 1. And this will be probably a part 2, possibly a part 3 series to this, so we won't go over everything tonight. So chapter 1 says purposes and principles of the convention. Let me see if anybody has came in yet. Okay. Islam, everyone. Okay, chapter 1. Purposes and principles of the convention. Now this is a whole bunch of definitions. Okay, simple and plain. You can read it. But I want to read specific definitions right now. J. It says American means a naturalized person or member of the foreign and de facto United States intergovernmental organization in Morocco. Okay, so this relates to the term privileged American or the phrase privileged American that we read from earlier. Naturalized person or member, a member, not a citizen, not a national, a member of a corporation. What corporation? A member of a foreign and de facto United States intergovernmental organization in Morocco. Organizations don't have nationals. Organizations don't have citizens, right? Um, America, when we go back up to I, we see means a foreign privileged dependent state in Morocco and subject to the principles of Moroccan law as binding on the ministerial decrees of Moorish consular courts per the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1836, the Madrid Convention of 1880, and the Act of Algeciras 1906, inter alia, or etc. So, and again, I'm glad that popped up. This is a draft. This is not the official document. Okay, so this is currently being reviewed, possibly edited, right? So keep that in mind. But here we have um, America and American. Okay, so remember it says privileged dependent state. Okay, America. Now, why is that a dependent state? Because the United States of America is who is actually on the contract, the treaties. That's the nationality that we have given them or agreed to call them, label them as, so they can express human rights. But they're operating as United States corporation. Okay. United States of Morocco means a formal treaty alliance between each independent or interdependent Moorish state government to serve, protect, and defend the integrity of domains throughout the Empire of Morocco, as correlative to the preamble of the Act of Algeciras, Article 105, and the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations. More on the purposes of the Wazir Regional Council: to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace. Okay, removal of threats to the peace, and for the suppression of acts and aggression or other breaches of peace, and to bring out by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustment or settlement of regional disputes, international disputes, or situations which might lead to a breach of peace throughout the Empire of Morocco. So, breaching peace. This is all about if anybody breaches peace. This is all about security, right? So, this is once we take United States or United acting as United States of America to court, right? Once we take United States of America to court,
The ICJ.
right? Once we take them to the ICJ, things will be enforced. That means, as of today, real time, being that we haven't taken them to court, let's just say you're a Moorish official, you're a Moorish national, meaning you're part of a Moorish state, right? Because to be a national, you got to pledge allegiance to a state, a Moorish state, to be a Moorish national, right? So uh, let's just say you as an official or even a diplomat um, you're traveling in your conveyance, right? You get pulled over by a policy enforcer. They see your state ID, your Moorish state ID. They see your diplomatic ID, your diplomatic bag tag, or diplomatic bag, whatever you want to call it, your diplomatic ID. Um, and they still decide to write you a ticket or say something like, you got to go to court, right? Or they still decide to uh, pick on you or pick at you. I'm going to say pick on you, pick at you. So things have not been enforced, right? They haven't been enforced by the courts for them to change their demeanor, change their character, change how they're handling life itself. When things are enforced, then they're in their backs are more against the rope, because once things are enforced, there is no more right. I'm gonna write you a ticket anyway. No, 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 no. There's a law that more states have enacted, and it's already been enforced that these are the laws that should be respected. That means the barrier between you Injustice is coming closer and closer, and it's closer and closer. So when things are enforced, right? Of course, there's two sides of the coin. Respect will be given, and even some won't respect it. What happens when they don't respect it? Well, we're taking the ICC. What happens when we're taking the ICC? Well, you see the blue hats come in, the United Nations Army, right? In some cases. But basically, people are removed. And this is the whole, if you want to quote unquote, sent back to Europe. Whoever gets sent back or sent to jail, nonetheless. So, um, point two, to develop friendly relations among modern state government, modern Moroccan states based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen regional peace. Point three, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, gender, sex, language, or religion, and to be center for harmonizing the actions of the member states of the United States of Morocco alliance in the attainment of these common ends. So we're all for opening doors for quote unquote United States citizens to exercise human rights as long as they identify themselves de jure and lawfully as Americans. We're not supposed to be bitter about establishing our states or establishing laws or treating anybody with any type of ill treatment, spite, revenge. They place themselves at because that's where they choose to be. Because if they do, regardless, somebody has to pay. If you identify yourself as American, well, you're coming to the light that much faster. You're proving our point that much faster. Because guess who got to follow the law? Americans. What happens when they follow the law? They pay rent. Lawfully, there's surely no problem, amongst many other things. So they don't want. Well, let's just continue reading. Article 2, the Wazir Regional Council and its member states, in pursuit of the purposes stated in Article 1, shall act in accordance with the following principles. Let's see. Okay. The Wazir Regional Council is based on the triple principle of the sovereign equality of all member states. So, what is the triple principles? Sovereignty and independence. The second one is integrity of domains. The third one is economic liberty without any inequality. Remember, Noble Drew told Moors to be industrious. Which principle does that have to do with more than any other? Economic liberty without any inequality, right? Economics, right? Talking about none the least business, being industrious. Now, Moors basically jumped the gun because there's three principles. Before you get the wealth, some people want reparations, right? before you tap into any standpoint, any degree of wealth, as far as state goes, being industrious is the last principle. You must first establish a government first before you develop the government, right? That's sovereignty and independence. This is not opinion. This is in the active out series. This is actual law. This is in the France versus United States American court case. This is Moroccan law, these triple principles. So this is nothing that some more just came up with. So the triple principle, again, sovereignty and independence. What's sovereign? The state is sovereign, not the individual person. The state is sovereign. That's what's sovereign. That's what has the ultimate authority, the ultimate power. The state, not the individual. The individual doesn't govern the state. We have heads of state that govern the state. Different heads. Right? So what is the state? The state is seen as a person. Why do Moors get confused when we say, but why is there confusion when Moors say sovereignty? I'm sovereign, right? In reference to themselves as an individual. But state is seen as a person, not the you as a person, not even though we know person means corporation, right? We also know person is a noun, right? Person, place, or thing, right? So the state is the person. That's the person that is seen as a sovereign. Now, again, sovereignty is a spiritual thing and has its aspects of individualism, the spiritual standpoint. If you're talking about grounding it, actuality, and law, we're talking about statehood. It's like when Moore say, my state is my state of mind. Well, that's spiritual. But when we talk about international law, direct, state is not just your state of mind. It has a different standpoint. So sovereignty and independence. Independence doesn't need to be explained, right? But I will say this. That means that if sovereignty and independence is the first principle, that means you and your people and whatever you got, that's what you're attached to. That's what you use. Right? Not United States codes, because we're not United States citizens, not United States Constitution, because the Constitution constitutes them and their citizens. That's for them. Like the Constitution for France is for France and their government and their citizens. That's for them. Germany, etc. There's no need to enforce anybody else's constitution that constitutes their government. That's their government. We know we need our governments. So where's our constitution? But Ali said enforce the constitution. If you read the divine warning, I made a video on that, and basically I don't have the picture at hand, but it is on my social media, on the YouTube channel, where I explain it more. But basically, in the divine warning, I'm paraphrasing this. Don't take it word for word. I should go to the picture, but basically, he says that we are to take votes within our own using our own constitution. When people think a national constitution, remember, how can you be a national without having your own state? How can you be a Moorish national, excuse me, without having a Moorish state? You can't be a Moorish national in a colonizer state, de facto state, even if there was the United States of America still. You can't be a Moorish national in a European state. Politically, they're Americans, not Moors, right? So I break that down in that video. But let's get back to this document. The second principle. What is the second principle? Integrity of domains. That's the hardest principle to exercise by far. Why? Because integrity deals with people doing the right thing when nobody's looking. Now, are they doing that? No.
Nah.
Right? So we need the integrity of our domains, meaning that whatever we do, we expect people to respect it because that's the law, even ourselves. Nobody's above the law. So integrity of domains is us getting them to respect our states. That means our state IDs. That means everything else that we establish. We don't want no tension, even though we know it's going to be tension. That's why we have consular courts, right? There's two sides to each coin. So, in which we can even further talk about. But let's just stay where we're at right now, if we can. If anybody has any questions or comments on that, I definitely encourage y'all to ask or comment on that, or anything else. So, the second principle, right quick, more on that. Again, simply establishing and exercising your Moorish state ID is integrity, exercising integrity domains, right? Exercise anything that your state has developed. What's the last principle? Economic liberty without any inequality, right? So, um, uh, some of us are familiar with the term taxation without representation, right? That means that if they're not representing you, right, then here comes a problem with the taxes because I'm not giving you my money if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? So economic liberty without any inequality is all about building the economy because the first two principles have already been exercised and established, right? Seen as unwavering principles. But now the third principle, economic liberty without any inequality. This is much higher than taxation without representation, right? This is beyond that. This is you tapping into your wealth, not having to go buy land and try to get off of the grid when you're still a United States citizen. That even if you made a trust, guess what? We're making corporate trusts because everything is a corporation. These trusts only hold so much weight. Even the Supreme Court is a corporation, only holds so much weight. So let's continue these points. Um, uh, More about the principles of the Wazir and purposes of the Wazir Regional Council, right? So I'm trying to find the paragraph. Let's read 6. The Wazir Regional Council shall ensure that the Moroccan states, which are not members of the convention, act in accordance with these principles so far as may be necessary for the maintenance of regional and international peace and security. Nothing contained in this present convention shall not prevent the authorization of the United States General Assembly, the UN Secretariat, and its organs, or its staff to intervene in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of any Moroccan state. Wherefore, Section 7 of this Article 2 shall require the Wazirs in their member state to submit such matters to settlement under the present convention, but this principle shall not prejudice the application of enforcement measures under Chapter 6 and 7. Okay, so this is all giving reference to different resources that we can all read and see what the general provisions and the outlines and stipulations are in these documents to make us refer to these documents, just as it does in the whereas section. Okay, so uh, membership, I guess we can talk about that. Membership, real quick. Does anybody have any questions or comments at the moment before we continue? Okay. So membership, chapter 2. The original members of the convention shall be the Moroccan states having participated in the Wazir Regional Conference in the state of Alodium Morse Pretium Ante, Colorado, in Morocco, signed the present multilateral agreement and ratified it in accordance with Article 110. Right? Um, let's see. Okay, trying to get straight to the point because I mean all these are good points, but I'm trying to find the points that need to be expounded upon to a great degree. Um, because Article 5 and 6 basically talk about the admission of a new state, um, which is not much to really explain on. It's pretty self-explanatory. So we'll go down to chapter 3. Chapter 3 talks about the organs, right? The organization. Okay, these are established provincial organs of the convention as follows. There are established provincial organs of the convention as follows. A Wazir Regional Council, which we're speaking about right now, a Secretariat, a Security Council of Defense, which is similar to the United Nations Security Council, right? Except this is specifically the Security Council of Defense, a Treasury, an Economic and Social Council, a Trusteeship Council, and a compulsory Regional Supreme Court of Justice. Okay, these are the organs in which remember what the Wazir Regional Council is. If you've read that, it's a council that's handling the duties of the United States of Morocco until the United States of Morocco is fully established. Okay, so these organs are, if we look at the United Nations, right, we see they have certain organs. That's why all of these names are pretty much mimicking their organs. Why? Because the United Nations in totality is Moroccan law. Why is it Moroccan law? Well, when we look at the United Nations itself and France, right, specifically, we see that, well, like I said, the United Nations itself was made to reform. Reform what? The fallen empire. That's what it was made to reform. What else was it made to do? Decolonize. A big part of our reformation. Except it's here to decolonize everybody, right? So this is what Morse should have grew into, basically, by now. Exactly what the United Nations is doing. If the empire was still up and running and we grew into the proper development, this is what it would look like. The United Nations is in our place. So, well, I should say this more specifically. Our seats of offices in organs throughout this world should be governed by the Moroccan Empire as it once was. The whole world is Morocco. Truth be told, the facts don't match the truth. Not yet, but it will. So part two, yeah. Does somebody have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I got a few questions, but I think I'd rather just wait till we get through the material towards the end. Yeah, I'd rather
Okay,
just
Islam.
listen on the material first.
Okay. So part two of Article 7 says such subsidiary organs as may be found necessary may be established in accordance with the present convention. The council shall elect the executive director of the secretariat, and the inspector general of the Security Council of Defense for a term of 4 years, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just instructions. Another term that J. Bay uses is checking the boxes. That means following instructions. What instructions? Whatever instructions are on the document that you're uplifting, the treaties, etc. So, um, uh, okay, let's go down to chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4 is the Wazir Regional Council composition. Article 9. Well, let's just go to Article 10, talking about the functions and powers. Okay. Um, well, no, we can read Article 9. Article 9 says the Wazir Regional Council shall consist of only duly elected and recognized Wazir al-Res from their state of origin. So only one Wazir al-Res from each Moor state is what makes up the Wazir Council. Okay. Now remember, we probably won't get into much of the consul generals or the muftis today because they come around Article 40 or something like that. Um, but all the muftis of the Moor state may want to stay tuned and stay hip to this series because in this document is an outline of instructions. So the functions and powers. The Wazir Regional Council may discuss any questions or any matters within the scope of the present convention or relate to the powers and functions of any organs provided in the present convention, and except as provided in Article 12, may make recommendations to the member states of the Council or to the Security Council of Defense or to both on any such questions or matters. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Um, Article 11. Let's see. We see, okay, all about security, right? So this is again, it's the functioning powers, the functioning of the WRC. The Wazir Regional Council may consider the general principles of cooperation in the maintenance of regional and international peace and security, including the principles governing disarmament and the regulation of armaments, and may make recommendations about such principles to the member states or to the Security Council of Defense as a natural correlation with the Act of Algeciras, Chapter 1 and 2, inter alia, or etc. So, armaments, disarming. Why this is security. This is lane number one in the spirit of security. Disarming, right? So what does that mean? More states must enact laws on arms, but we must stay in alignment with our treaties before we make these laws on our arms. So we know we're not crossing the lines of our own treaties. So what does the treaty say? Right? What treaty are we talking about specifically in this case? The Act of Algeciras, chapters 1 and 2. Right? Chapter 1 talks about police officers, basically, how police officers are supposed to be, or policemen are supposed to be, or policy enforcers are supposed to be governed. Chapter 2 talks about arms, right? In which only, remember, this is the Act of Algeciras, which was between states. When we take the United States to court, they must prove that they're a state, or else we're talking to a brick wall, right? So, um, chapters 1 and 2. So we want to make sure our laws are in scope, are in the accordance with those two chapters specifically when we make our laws, right? We can go to govinfo.gov, look up laws on arms, disarmament, etc. What do? Plug and play, copy and paste, right? So disarming. Remember, this is all about diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations is one of the
You said
first
law of
things.
disarmament.
You say what now?
You said go. You said go look up laws of disarmament. Dishonor. I'm trying to make sure because I'm writing this down so I can look into it later. You said law of disarmament.
Yeah, it's trying to highlight the word.
Oh, I see it. Shit.
Yeah,
All right.
where it says armament and disarmament.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So diplomatic relations, right? When we're looking at these policy enforcers, they all carry guns, armed. They're armed, right? So um, when we're establishing diplomatic relations in our own state, if we have laws, right, whether we take them to court or not, if we have laws and we're diplomats, right, consular officers, et cetera, and we're reaching out to shake their hand. Why? Because the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, right? That's a treaty about diplomacy, peace and friendship. That's what diplomacy is all about. So when we go to reach and shake hands, and that other hand is on the gun, that's not secure for us, right? Why is somebody part of a corporation in our state impersonating an officer etc., etc. Right? This is about peace and friendship. Well, that means that our first steps, our first laws are looking like what? They're aimed at arms. They're aimed at security, national security, Security Council, anything dealing with security, especially when we talk about arms, to make it make sense. It's more immediate than anything else. So let's go to the next point. 2. The Wazir Regional Council may discuss any questions relating to the maintenance. Did I read this? Okay, no. Relating to the maintenance of regional or international peace and security brought before it by any member state of the council, by the Secretariat, by the Inspector General, or by a Moroccan state which is not a member of the council, in accordance with Article 35, Paragraph 2, and except as provided in Article 12, may make recommendations with regard to any such questions to the state or dependent states concerned, or to the Security Council of Defense, or to both. Any questions on which action is necessary shall be referred to the council of the council by the Secretariat, either before or after discussion. Again, instructions, boxes to check. So what we can take from Article 11 is armaments. That's a big piece of the message. Armaments. Okay. So the Wazir Regional Council is looking to control the arms and making sure they're in accordance with the laws. Article 12. While the Wazir Regional Council is exercising in respect or any dispute or situation, the functions assigned to it in the present convention, the Secretariat or Security Council of Defense shall accept any recommendation regarding to that dispute or situation. And then Article 12 pretty much outlined, well, let's just read it. The Inspector General or the Executive Director, with the consent of the Wazir Regional Council, shall notify the Security Council of Defense at each session of any matters relative to the maintenance of regional or international peace and security, which are being dealt with by the Security Council of Defense. So the Security Council of Defense deals with this peace and security, right? And shall similarly notify the Inspector General or Secretariat in the Wazir Regional Council if it is not in session immediately if the Security Council of Defense ceases to deal with such matters. So the Security Council of Defense, remember, this is an organ, right, of the United States of Morocco, but this Security Council of Defense is takes instructions from the Wazir Regional Council. When we read more about the Security Council of Defense, we'll find that it consists of muftis, security or consul generals, security. Excuse me. I can't even think of the word. I said it so much. Consul generals. So some of us may seem Lamont ill, take on the identity as a consul general, but he's not set up right. That's why he's been detained.
Right.
So when we're consul generals, right? Obviously, you've been elected into a state along with other government officials. That means you obviously. How can we tell if somebody has truly set up a state? How can you tell?
When they got a constitution, a seal, and a flag, and probably another something else maybe. But yeah, that's what I know.
Yep. And even more
3
so.
branches of government
Yeah, there you
Yep.
go.
and elected officials.
Legislative branch.
Elected officials, legislative branch, right? A public inauguration that must be public, meaning that people can see you take your oath of office, right? These are the simple, basic instructions that any more say they are part of a state, right? Especially just as simple as a public inauguration. That means that on you can see the video physically, somebody stating their name, taking that oath. That way it's no funny business, right?
Where the
So
hell did Rico
there's a
go?
there's a
Oh, my bad.
are you good? Ask her what? Did you want to ask or comment on something?
Oh no, I was just looking and I didn't see my man Delinko in here. But yeah, you can continue. I yield.
Okay. Let me check to see if anybody else made it in. Okay. So um the Security Council of Defense. We'll read more about that as we read the document, which we probably won't get to all of understanding that today. Probably a part two. So Security Council of Defense at each well, we read that. So let's continue to Article 3 is pretty self-explanatory. Basically saying what the WRC is promoting, human rights, economic, social, cultural, educational, and health fields, and assistance in realizing human rights and fundamental freedoms, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty self-explanatory. Article 14, subject to the provisions of Article 12, the WRC may recommend measures for the peaceful adjustments of any situation, regardless of origin, which it deems likely to impair the general welfare or friendly relations among the Moroccan states or between dependent American states and Moorish states. Whoa, lowercase s, in which in the beginning,
Uppercase. Okay.
yep, uppercase, because it's just like the term United States of America. Whichever way you want to go, we talking to you, right? So whether it's important to address both, identify both, identify Indiana State, identify the state of Indiana. Those are two different things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So leaving no stone left unturned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it says, including situations resulting from the violation of the provisions of the present convention, setting forth the purposes and principles of the present convention as correlative with the provisions set forth in the Moroccan bilateral and multilateral treaties, conventions, and arrangements throughout the Moorish Empire. The Charter of the United Nations shall act as a guiding principle in the accomplishment of these peaceful settlements. Okay. Um, Article 15, the Wazir Regional Council shall receive and consider annual and special reports from the Security Council of Defense, right? Annual and special reports, uh, and the secretary, excuse me. These reports shall include an account of the measures that the Security Council of Defense and the Secretariat have decided upon or taken to maintain international peace and security. So any concerns that the Security Council of Defense and the Secretary has are to put in this annual report, take certain cornerstones that will greatly contribute to the reformation and establishment of the WRC in other Moroccan states in general. Okay, cornerstone, the most effective things, right? The most effective needs, et cetera, et cetera. Article 16, let's skip down to that. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. Well, let's talk about this Article 16 right quick. The WRC shall perform such functions with respect to the regional or international trusteeship. Right. So what is the trusteeship? Well, remember, these organs mimic the United Nations. Okay. What is the trusteeship council in the United Nations? Well, the trusteeship council is exactly what is it? It's about trusteeship. What trusteeship? Well, if we have, if we're setting up national trusts, if we have treaties, how are we trustees of these treaties? How can we enforce these treaties? Right? It's the trusteeship council saying that, okay, you say you're a part of this treaty backs you. Okay, well, we can make you the middle piece between this treaty, right, and this state, which is going to have a national trust. It's the trusteeship council, right? They're not known to be active, mainly because there's there's not as much colonization going on as it once was, even though there is a lot of colonization going on. There's currently 80 countries have been decolonized, not fully, but they have started the process of decolonization thanks to the instructions given to the UN, which is based on the instructions of treaties. Right, so this is not to subject. This is them explaining your treaties. So the 80 states that have been decolonized, partially at least. Many, if you look up, you can find this on the United Nations website on one of the pages. At the bottom of that page, I forgot what the page was. I believe it's the trusteeship, something in relation to the trusteeship council. Some link around there in relation to that. You can find, or if you just type in United Nations decolonization, you'll likely find this page if you just type that in Google. But at the bottom of the page is a list of different states, countries that have been decolonized, and it will tell you to what degree. Most are islands that are still dealing with what's called the Commonwealth, right? Nonetheless, they have set forth decolonization. The reason they have Commonwealth, each region is kind of different. It's pretty much the same, but kind of different, still to some degree. Um, so let's continue this next point, this next article. And let's see, what time is it? We've been in this for about an hour 20. Okay, we'll continue for about another 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so. And conclude around yeah, 8:45 or so. So Article 17. The Wazir, the WRC shall consider and approve the budget of the council and its organs. Okay, so this basically goes into about the treaty and trusteeship. Okay, administration. Okay, in which it's important. I don't want to speak on that now, even though it is important. The Treasury, just to say this, in the voting, I'll skip over that as well. Okay, yeah. So yeah, the Treasury is eye to eye with the legislative branch. Some people argue that the Treasury Department is the highest degree in the government or most important. Some people say that the legislative branch is the highest degree and most important because without laws, what is a government? And without a treasury, what is a government? So um, they're both very important, but I did want to skip over that. I do want to skip over that for now. We can speak more on the United States of Morocco treaty organizations, though, right? The United States of Morocco Treaty Organization articles shall be drafted by the WRC and come into force by protocol sessions to serve as a military alliance for homeland security throughout the Moorish Empire. Military alliance. So we were talking about this army. So we established this document is about arms. We established that much so far. It's about security. It's about diplomatic relations. What else is it about? It's about the military alliance, controlling the military for homeland security. This is giving us direct words we can type into govinfo.gov, right? Find what we can plug and play, right? What we need to edit. Um, so military, and we all know that deals with a great deal of things. Remember, we dealing with the top tier things. Then we let it trickle down from there. So the military, if we talk about security, we ain't just talking about policy enforcement. We talking about the military. We're talking about National Guard, the guards nationals, right? So let's continue. The WRC shall appoint an inspector general and establish a Security Council of Defense in harmony with the provisions of the United States of Morocco Treaty Organization. The inspector general shall appoint a Moorish minister of defense to command the police and military committee for the maintenance of regional and international peace and security and for equitable geographical distribution throughout the Moorish ports and trade routes. The international law of the sea shall not prejudice the treaty rights of Moors and international law of the sea. Wow, I read that twice. And Moorish ports in pursuance with the Act of Algeciras, Article 123, inter alia. So a minister of defense is to command the police, right? Where does the minister of defense come from? They're appointed, right, by the inspector general. So this minister of defense that commands the police and military, right? These are similar duties or the duties, part of the duties of a mufti. Okay, so we continue to read. It says each member state. Excuse me, that's some. Each member state shall appoint to the Security Council of Defense one consul general or one mufti, and that representative shall have no more than 5,000 police or military personnel under their command for their state of origin. Why 5,000? We talking about the active out of series, direct numbers from the active out of series. So states, if you don't have already, will have to get their muftis into fine tuning, because uh, as we enforce, as we take United States to court, right? We preparing for that. We'll have to enforce our integrity of domains, in which the muftis will be greatly responsible for doing.
And Muftis, that stands for Security Council of Defense. Is that correct? The five, or military?
The mufti is specifically the consul general. So that's another name for the consul general. And the consul generals are what make up the Security Council of Defense. Right? As we read point 3 of Article 23, it says each member state shall appoint to the Security Council of Defense one consul general, right? That shall represent no more than 5,000 police or military personnel. And then we go on to the point 4. The sergeants at arms shall be under the command of the Moorish Minister of Defense without delay or interruption. The Moorish Minister of Defense shall be under the command of the Inspector General. Excuse me. The Inspector General shall be under the command of the Wazir Regional Council. So it's explaining the avenues and rankings, right? The WRC, or the Wazir Regional Council, right? It is giving instructions to the Inspector General, who is giving instructions to the Minister of Defense, okay, who gives instructions to the Sergeant at Arms, or the policy enforcers, right? Because their military is our military. Why? Because corporations are under states. If you're a corporation in this territory, guess what? We're claiming the land. Everything on top of the land is ours. Now, Americans, they have rights. They have a right to a lot of stuff. They have rights according to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. They can rightfully own businesses, et cetera, et cetera. This is commerce. It's the Treaty of Commerce, right? They have rights to set up shop, and so in respects to the treaties. But if you're not lawfully, jurely an American, then how can you express human rights from an American standpoint? Well, if we lay claim to the land, everything on top of it is ours if we're not crossing the lines of our treaties with the Americans. Well, who are the Americans? Nobody. So, and I say nobody because who took oaths to that? Nobody. There's nobody there. They all took oaths to the United States Corporation. So what's theirs is ours. So Um, time is it? Okay. Um, functions and powers, right? Again, we talk about the functions and powers of the United States of Moroccan Treaty Organization, which is still being established, just as this document is still being drafted and edited and yet to be established. So, functions and powers, Article 24. In order to ensure prompt and effective action by the Wazir Regional Council, its member states confer on Security Council of Defense and the Inspector General the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, and agree that in carrying out its duties under the responsibility of the Moorish Minister of War, the sergeants at arms, and their police and military acts on their behalf. So who's controlling the sergeants, the 5,000 sergeants in this state? It's the Moorish minister, right? Who was taking orders from the Security Council of Defense, who are taking orders from the Wazir Regional Council. Um, Point two, in discharging these duties, the Security Council of Defense shall act in accordance with the purposes and principles of the Wazir Regional Council, and as a natural corollary to the United Nations Charter. The specific powers granted to the Security Council of Defense for the discharge of these duties are laid down in chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9. Excuse me, 6, 7, 8, and 12. So let's skip down to 25, Article 25. The organs and representatives of the Secretariat, which includes the organs of the Security Council of Defense, agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the WRC and the member states in accordance with the present convention and in harmony with the articles of the United States of Morocco Treaty Organization. The United States of Morocco Treaty Organization shall also be under the command of the Wazir Regional Council and its military staff committee, etc., or inter alia. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory. In order to promote the establishment and maintenance of international peace and security, with at least diversion for armaments of the world's human and economic resources, the Security Council of Defense and the Inspector General shall be responsible for formulating, with the assistance of the Military Staff Committee referred to in Articles 24 and 47, plans to be submitted to the member states for the establishment of the system for the regulation of armaments. Okay, so the Security Council of Defense and Inspector General are responsible again for setting up a system in accordance with Article 24 and 47 for armaments. Right? We talking about everything that has to do with arms, the stores, the policy and the gun stores specifically, or stores in general that sell guns. Military forms, first and foremost, policy enforcers, anything to do with arms. Where was I? The United States of Morocco Treaty Organization shall act in harmony with this article, recalling that the Act of Algeciras, Chapter 1 and 2, set forth reforms for the Moorish government to organize the police and regulate the detection and repression of contraband arms, right? Smuggled weapons throughout the Moroccan Empire. Okay. Let's see. much time do we got? Okay. Um. Well, I'll start off reading chapter 6 because as we get into the 40s, is it kind of gets more concentrated on the consul generals. We can start the next part 2 with that. So, um, chapter 6, the regional settlement of dispute in Morocco. Article 33. The parties to any dispute in the continuance of which is likely to endanger the maintenance of regional and international peace and security shall first seek a solution by negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort um, to regional agencies or arrangements or other peaceful means of their own choice. Okay, so when we have a dispute, right, which is likely to endanger maintenance and regional security, we first seek friendly relations. The Wazir Regional Council, in cooperation with the organs of the Secretariat and the Inspector General, shall, when it deems necessary, call upon the parties to settle their disputes by such means. Okay. Um, let's see. Okay. Um, okay, let's just continue reading. Article 34. The Inspector General or the organs of the Secretariat may investigate any dispute or any situation which might lead to the regional or international friction or give rise to a dispute in order to determine whether the continuance of the dispute or situation is likely to endanger the maintenance of international peace and security, or excuse me, a report shall be communicated to the Wazir Regional Council. So the frictions, again, if they continue, especially after we take them to court, to cause friction, right, agitating the situation, like giving citations unlawfully, right, trying to detain someone, finding out that they can't be detained, and you got to get them a courtesy ride home because they're a part of a more state. Things, certain doors will be closing as certain things will be enforced. Now, keep in mind, again, the United Nations is for decolonization. That's one thing that they're here for, meaning that the people they're decolonizing don't have their own military. They don't have their own financial system. They don't have their own laws. They don't have any respect. They're colonized. They don't have anything or little to none. So people or states specifically are not expected to have everything. They're not. You don't need a military, uh, the right form of currency, all the people in the world, or et cetera, to do what you have to do. A lot of people are waiting for some type of kumbaya system for to be instilled so we can all just get along. No, it's not. The mature way for saying unity is uniformity, right? That means you organize yourself. We organized, or we're an organization that became a state. We organized ourselves and established ourselves as a state. Now we're a state, not an organization. We're a state that has organizations that support it or under it. Um, so Article 35. Any member state of the United Nations, excuse me, any member state of the United Nations Charter may bring any dispute or any situation of the nature referred to in Article 34 to the attention of the Inspector General, the Secretariat of the WRC. A Moroccan state which is not a member state of the convention may bring to the attention of the Council, the Secretariat, or Inspector General any dispute to which it is a party, if it accepts in advance, for the purpose of the dispute, the obligations of the regional settlement of disputes provided in the convention. Okay, so even more states who are not members, there's still stipulations, instructions you can follow, you can use for assistance, even if there's more states that don't have consul generals or muftis. There's still instructions that you can follow for assistance according to this convention. And we'll read more about that in part 2. But I do want to conclude this study session um, at Article 35, and we'll probably pick up back at Article 35 or 36, and as we start part 2. But I like to open the floor up for any questions um, or concern statements, anything that anybody may have at the moment. Devontae Bay, I'm wasn't what didn't you have a question or comments earlier? Since nobody else is speaking, I reverted back to you.
I think my Wi-Fi going on.
Okay, Islam. So we'll take give you a few moments to get yourself together. Hopefully that happens. Does anybody else have any questions or questions or comments?
Islam nobles.
Islam.
All right. I was just it's a slight question, but utilizing the United Nations and being being in assistance with one another with these Moroccan state governments. I think the last part that you was just saying, so this would be whether we moved and question to the United Nations individually, like individual state, or in unison together.
Yes, and it's in unison.
Okay.
The WRC, as we can see, if you go back to the organ section, if anybody has screenshot or taking notes or anything, um, the organ section mimics the organs or the departments that the United Nations has. So if you study their organs, their titles are very similar, and some are the exact similar as the organs that we went over, right? For the United Nations in Morocco. So this the WRC, right? It being a placeholder, still a effective organ that would still be used even when the United States of Morocco is established. But it's an organ itself in which that basically this WRC document is to set up or reform what the United Nations established in our system. So in our more states, we have laws. The laws come from anywhere. A lot of times it comes from the United States, right? Because they already set up shop. They're custodians. Now, when we enact laws, of course, we can use wording from the United Nations, but predominantly it's the United States laid that stuff out. Uh, as far as the WRC goes, and things outside of or that the more states are attached to, now we're talking about um, coming together in a more unified sense, just as the United Nations did. So the state is part and parcel to the United States of Morocco, right? The state is like a person, just as we are part and parcel to the state itself. So it's a chain effect, right? Um, so we can look at it just as we are individuals, right? The individual is the Moorish national of the state, right? The state is a group, but the state is seen as one entity, one person. We put an energy into one entity, right? This one entity or this person, this state, is putting its energy into another state, which is the United States of Morocco, right? We acting as another entity or a central government, basically, more directly put, more correctly put. It's a central government. So these independent states, this is us individuals, we come into a state, and these individual states come into the United States of Morocco, where all the states come together and form an entity, right? So, when we look at things like the Bible, right, the Quran, or any spiritual thing that mentions entities, let's just stick with the Bible for now. The Bible speaks about nations, really, in treaties. It does have many other angles and levels to it, of course, but one of those levels is all about nations, law, and treaties. Whenever we see, and I'm not going to rant about this, but whenever we see, um, what's that word? What's that thing they call it? I cannot think of the word right now. What's another name for the promise that God said he would keep?
A
I cannot think of the
covenant.
word. Covenant. I want to say convention so bad. But yeah, covenant, thank you. A treaty is another name for a covenant. That's them masking that. So when Noble Drali said we don't even need a knife to carry, why? Because our state protects us. So our sovereign state bring us immunity, right? No ill will is bringing us immunity, strengthening our system, right? Protecting our system so that nothing can invade our system. So um, I want to end my point before I open the floor for any more questions and comments um, by simply stating that um, this document it covers a great deal of the initial things that must be done in all more states. There may be some confusion as to where do we start first, right? There's so many laws that must be enacted. Where do we start first? Well, we start in the respective spheres of development. And by that, I mean, right, diplomatic relations being one, we have to concentrate on that sphere, right? Well, what is a diplomat concerned about? The, study the history. I'm talking about even the history to where one person was sent, and that one person that was sent by some nation had to walk hundreds of miles or whatever the case may be, ride a horse or whatever, right? Come with the letter in the pocket, roll it down like a scroll in front of the king and say what it is. All of
This
that.
is why.
Take it back to those times to where what are the concerns of a diplomat? What is the reality of the diplomat? How can you protect the diplomat on a mission? Don't kill the messenger, right? So again, we can plug and play diplomacy, diplomatic relations. That leads into consular relations, arbitration, litigation, even liquidation. So the respective spheres, keep it simple and plain, is diplomatic relations, um, consular relations, right? In which has its own avenues within it, right? Arms, the military, et cetera, et cetera. On top of everything that you've already done. Some of the more states already established more state IDs. Well, those more state IDs need laws to protect it so you can use it safe, no tension, right?
Facto.
Our certificates of live births, what are these? These are vital statistics. We need laws for vital statistics, right? Some of us may have tried to authenticate the birth certificate, had to call the vital statistics place, right? We need laws for vital statistics. I'm gonna stop saying that word, so I'm about to get tongue tied. So, are there any more questions or comments before we conclude this study session?
Yeah, I just had a quick question because I know that word mufti means consul general, but you know how to like, spell that? Like if you, because I'm just want to figure out how you spell that real quick.
Was you talking about Mufti?
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, it's Mufti.
Okay, appreciate that. Word.
No problem. So,
Islam. So
any
I,
more?
my bad. I
Yeah.
understand why you had said what you had said to me that day. So when you was like, yeah, you can basically go through the impact constitution and lay yours out in the same sense because it was basically it's already basically coming from the same type of the same constitution as in like the UN or how it's set up. So it would be in unison with the same, you know what I'm saying, constitution / or covenant. So if we was to go ahead and do so, like with me and more being that we don't have our flag and seal together at the moment, that's what we're discussing right now. But we can go ahead and get our constitution down on paper and do our editing for our own state government. Correct?
Yeah, correct. Um, and just to bring a little bit more clarity, because there was a word that stuck out to me. As far as the United Nations, since they're just an international organization and they're not a government themselves, they don't have a constitution. Not saying that organizations can't have constitutions, but what they have is a charter that governs them.
True indeed. They charter the same way they charter was laid out. Okay. It came from in compliance. Is that the right word to use? In compliance with that charter.
yeah, in compliance with the United Nations Charter, and pretty much uh, AMPAC, being that they were the first more state government to establish a state in the state constitution, uh, pretty much just plug and play with the rest of the world. You know, we can look at the Kingdom of Morocco's constitution. See how it's set up. You know, they got a whereas section, et cetera, et cetera. Therefore, and all that. So, you know, as far as plug and play, the United Nations made it very simple because back in the day when we had our treaties, some of the wording sometimes it wasn't clear, right? Especially consider the fact that we don't speak how we used to. So some of the wording and how it's put is sometimes not very clear. A lot of windows have been opened due to the fact that life has changed to a great deal since then. So, you know, uh, the United Nations has laid out the instructions as to what needs to be done and what document. They have a lot of model instruments, meaning that one of the steps the more states will have to do is accede to treaties. And the United Nations has a model instrument, which means that you can plug and play, use that document to, uh, edit it in your favor to do what must be done. So exactly as Delinko stated, um, the United Nations does have a system to where we can mimic, not only because the instructions are there, because things like model instruments are laid out, right? So yeah, that was a good point.
One more question before I yield the floor. All right. So in a sense where you were saying about how we have to have the vital statistics, the same how everybody else, every other nation have their system set up. The impact already have theirs. I don't know the words you use, plug and played or in their behalf or mimicked in their behalf with the vital statistics and the other branches of governments they have that we can add on from as well. And like I'm pretty sure is necessary for it to be cross-referenced amongst all the other Moroccan state governments as well when we do our own editing of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So they do have it already in a certain sense. They already have that part mimicked as well, so we can go off of that with the vital statistics, the DOTs, and all of that.
Yeah. As far as the vital statistics specifically, no, not that yet. Though there are continuous, more serious. I ain't gonna say more serious, but you know, uh, a certificate of live birth is not as uh, needed to talk about as much as a certain treaty, you know what I mean, or a certain law that we enact, certain things like that. So it is certain documents is continuously being shared throughout the more states, so we can all be on the same page and you know uh, catch up with one another, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a continuous thing. However, not with every single document. Um, because some of the documents are internal, are made for the internal affairs of that state, or they may have internal laws for that state specifically. Um, and things like a certificate of live birth, those things a lot of times, depending on what it is, can be easily found or copy and pasted without much explanation, even though those are things to talk about. You know, um, So the documents that need more assistance are the documents that need or more clarity, I should say, are the documents that are being shared first and foremost. Um, but as far as to answer the other part of the question, um, the development of the ANPAC and other states. Obviously, the earlier states are ahead in many areas, but as far as ANPAC goes, let's just use them for example. I'd say Colorado. They have established auto insurance for from their state for their state. Um, of course, this isn't a business as in they're coming out of a building, you know,
Hello?
attracting certain people, nationals and stuff. This is not obviously it's not that, but what it is though again is a corporation, right? A business set up under the Moore state, and it's already has this so much development, right? And policies, etc., in which that even without a building, it can operate. The only thing is that when we step into these buildings, then AMPAC will be ready to develop into that standpoint without any hesitation, without any weight, because they already established certain policies, et cetera, to just let that fall in and continue as soon as they get it, right? And that's what all the more states must do, really plug and play with each other, right? Does this document work? Does this avenue work? Is this the best way? Okay, this state is exercising that. Okay, so we're gonna share with this state, right? And that's what even the WRC is for. As of right now, some of the officials in Meru are working on a law specifically for diplomatic and consular officers, right? This law, once it's finished, will be shared with the WRC so that everybody else can weigh in, plug and play, make everybody's life that much easier, right? So, um, not every state is going to copy everything, you know, but we're to basically why would we even concentrate on um auto insurance? Why? Out of all things, why that? Because we already dealing with state IDs. We already see that one of our heaviest pain points is traveling. So this is basically tackling the sphere of transportation, right? Identity, etc. So if you've already established 10%, let's just say the transportation sphere, by establishing your state IDs, Morse plates, diplomatic IDs, you might as well continue running down the field, right? You want to go all the way, might as well. Auto insurance, you might as well.
True indeed.
Yes, yes. And I wanted to just kind of chime in on that to um, piggyback off that. I think as more states as we develop and we grow, we need to focus on the fundamentals, like you said, the pain points, the immediate needs within each state based off of what's going on in that particular territory. And if we focus on those, that will allow the development that we need because we're still growing, but we're focusing on the immediate needs versus, let's say, things that may take a little bit more time. And let's address what's most important first.
Islam, and things like ever since I've been studying international law, I've been watching. Like in my free time, I don't watch what I used to watch. You know, conversations that the United Nations have, or anything at the uh, that your particular state may be hosting or having. You may be listening in on to how uh, they are, what problems that's de facto state may be having, right?
Exactly.
Um, et cetera, et cetera. in which they're basically, again, they're in our place. So they're speaking about what we should be speaking about in real time. So yeah, that was an excellent point. That was an excellent point. So we can learn to focus in more on ourselves and our territories and bring different things to the table, right? This will instill active mores and confidence because we're no longer dependent. We're not dependent states. We're no longer dependent on one another for information and activity. So are there any more it's been some great points said, and I thank y'all for that. Are there any more comments and
Islam.
questions?
Islam.
It's
Yeah, this is Noble Ronsky L out of the Michigan territory. First of all, brother, I love what you're doing with educating us on what we need. And you were speaking like on the covenant. And my question is like bylaws. Do we operate under bylaws, covenant? Or if we do, how do they intertwine? And I yield.
that's an excellent question. I'll read from uh, a post. Let me see. As soon as I find it, I'll go to it on the screen so you guys can see it. Just a second here. Let's see. Okay, so basically, I can't find it right now, but basically, and I read it yesterday. That's why I'm trying to find it. But so bylaws are basically no, we do not. Bylaws are basically have the same dominion as statutes, and here it is. Here it is. Okay. All right. So I'm about to go to it. Oh,
Why did he leave, man? Damn.
okay. So this is from the book Principles of Political Science. This basically explains the metaphysics or the science of politics, right? So it says for all local bodies, right, such as the Moorish Science Temple of America or any organization, a local body, are subordinate to the central government. Their laws are really only bylaws, right? In this respect, they are comparable to provincial governments in a federal system. They're comparable. Remember, Noble Drew Ali set up the Moorish Science Temple of America in a way that they can move like a government. It's a theocratic government, right? That means like theocracy, theocratic, theology. That's a religious organization. Theology deals with religion, right? So when we talking about comparable to provincial governments, it's not a provincial government, which is a state government, but it's comparable in a federal system. So they say they have their constitutions, which define their powers. Moorish Science Temple of America has a divine constitution, right? But it's not a state constitution. They can have their constitutions though, which defines their powers. They can make laws within limits, and anything done beyond these limits is ultra vires or beyond their powers. Whereas the provincial governments, i.e., the state government, of a federal state are guaranteed by a fundamental constitution unaltered by the ordinary process of legislation. Local bodies exist at the will of the central legislature, right? So it's saying local bodies are comparable. This continues to say that in another section, but the powers, functions, constitution of the local body are fixed by statute. So they're fixed by statutes. That's explaining, that's sketching out, outlining their value and dominion. They're not states. They don't have state laws. They're fixed by statutes. That's what gives them their limits. That's what tells them how far they can go and where they have to stop. Statutes. That's they're at the level of statutes, right? The Constitution and treaties also tell them, right? But they're at the level of statutes. That's their range. And it goes to say some writers, it is true, use the term local governments in a wider sense of state government in a federation. So basically, many people get this confused. Or local administration by government officials. This is not correct. It is not correct. When people say local government, they think, yeah, this is the state government. We need to send our paperwork into the Allen County courts, which is the courts here, the county courts here. You know, we need to send it into the Allen County courts. Just send your paperwork in and go do that. No, that's not correct. You missed the mark. That's wrong. Right? So let me see if I have another point. So did that answer your question, brother?
Yes, sir. Yes, it did. Thank you.
Islam.
Islam.
That's why whenever you get into it with these certain corporations and they try to arbitrate you or keep you subjected to their jurisdiction, they write you back and be like, you are to comply with the bylaws of this corporation. They use that word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's why I didn't want to get it confused at all.
Right. Right. And I brought up that so y'all can take a picture of that, because that's what I was talking about earlier. A free national ballot, right? Who are the nationals? Remember, the more subjects in their system, they're not nationals. They're more subjects, right? Under the free national constitution, you want to place your poll. You want to place a vote, a ballot at the polls. The state government. They're not states, though, right? So you got to get clear on the wording. What is the? There's another point. This was one on how human beings, individuals, cannot enforce treaties themselves. International treaty may confer rights or duties upon international persons lacking the capacity to conclude this very treaty themselves. Example, human beings. Human beings cannot. So if you ever heard a Moore say, yeah, I enforced the treaty, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You think you did, because something else got you thinking you got further than you did by how you set up, but not that treaty. Maybe that trust that you use to set up in the United States system. Maybe that.
Yeah,
but not that treaty.
definitely maybe that.
Remember, they do business. They set up a lot of more set up corporations in the United States so they can handle their civil and criminal perspectives, avenues that way. So when they think they be the case, it's not because they enforce a treaty. No, they just establish a trust, a corporation, articles of organization in the United States, the colonizer system, right? Just like Noble Drew Ali set up an organization in a colonizer system, used religion to shroud everything else, right? Why? Religion or spirituality is half the battle. That's 50-50. He came and instilled that idea. We had to bring it down to earth and finalize it, not by moving as a corporation in the United States. No, sovereign and independent.
And those are the small victories.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the small victories. A lot of more say how many cases you beat and try to use that as some form of measurement when really you shouldn't be in their courts anyway. A state official doesn't get summoned to somebody's courts. We go to the ICJ. It's not how many court cases you beat in their courts. In the United States courts, you're not supposed to be there. Not as a state official. You take it to the ICJ. Therefore, how many ICJ courts have you won? That's the real question. So, and I won't go. I'll probably make a video on all my pictures on my page because they explain a great deal of things one day. But are there any more questions or comments thus far before we conclude this?
Yeah, I do got a question and one comment. I can wait for the comment to see if there's any other questions. But my question is, as far as because in the North Carolina territory, like what colors should I really use for the flag, and like does that go into? Because I know Meru State, I see your flag in ANPAC in Atlanta. Theirs is like bluish. So like, does that really go into? Do I gotta really like go into like the state, my specific territory to see which colors to choose from, or is that basically like a freelance thing? You know, I just wanted just to see which colors should I be using and what not to use in that regard.
Yes, whatever y'all choose. You know,
Okay, okay,
Maru, how we did it was, just took the history of the territory, a few symbols, a few concepts, a few famous symbols, the peony flower, as you see on our state flag, um, and it has a certain representation here in this territory, as well as the other symbols. We took that and put it in a pot and came up with that. You know,
okay. All right.
yeah. Well, sorry, guys. So, are there any more questions or comments? And you can state your comment now if you like.
Okay. Well, yeah, my comment really is this. I just pray to Allah for better patience. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I just pray for better patience, you know, because I'm kind of tired of dealing with these hard-headed Moors, like to be quite honest, and following individuals that's not in the United States of Morocco, like they way over there in China, bro, and we not American, and you know what I mean. So I'm just, I guess I just need some. I know there's plenty of others to bring this knowledge to, but I'm not trying to be like that dude Gary on what's that Bird Box, whatever movie that is. He trying to like show like keep the people eyes open, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to be that guy either, but I definitely see the route that you take, and it's kind of yeah, and it's like whenever a more steps on social media, they're gonna see X, Y, Z. You know what I mean,
Hmm.
and go from there, and go from there. So, yeah, Yeah, that's just my comment. I just pray for better patience because I'm tired of dealing with it, you know. But and I know there's plenty of other people that can use this knowledge as well. But yeah, that's really all. That's really all I had to say for real. And any other questions I can ask you and me and Delinko will come together for any other questions.
Islam. So, are there any more questions or comments before we conclude this study session?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Islam.
Islam. When you study in a lot of these treaties, just goes back to the importance of wording. So pay attention to how many times you see the word states in these treaties and study that. So that's the comment I had. I yield the floor.
Islam, especially in that UNDRIP. A lot of these treaties, conventions mention the word states at least 40 times.
Are you referring to capital S or lowercase s?
Capital S.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
capital
clear on.
S.
Oops, sorry.
I'm clear on that.
Islam.
Islam.
One other thing too, before you make your point. Also know what the root meaning of state is. It's not just a body politic. It's a self-governing. You have your three branches of government. You can establish a consular court. Pay attention to that too. I yield the floor.
Islam.
Islam. I want to make sure the root word of American, or that the Albions are American, is it the 1952 court case with France between the United States? Or
Well, as far as understanding the definition more specifically, we can I'll put it like this: a lot of Moors believe they're Americans because of the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, which says Americans are, it's a term applied. It says it's a term applied to copper colored races found here by the Europeans, right? So that's what the dictionary says, but that's not what the treaties say. The treaties say the people that was here were Moroccans because the Sultan of Morocco invited the Americans here. That's when Americans were established as a thing, when we invited them here. So according to the 1828 dictionary, it says American is a term applied, but it's not applied in treaties, not applied in law. All of a sudden, this 1828 Webster's Dictionary come out of nowhere. It says this is applied to the copper-colored races. It's real general with the wording. It didn't say Moors, Moroccans. It say copper-colored races, and we know that the copper-colored people were also the colonists. So it's real general with the wording. So nowhere in law or in treaties, international law, is the term American applied to Moors. Because in the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, we see that there's Moroccans, a Moroccan government, and an American government. This is two distinctive people politically, or two distinctive governments, or two distinctive jurisdictions, right? So you can look up in 1828 Webster's Dictionary for the definition, and just as you said, in the France versus United States of America court case, there's a number of indications uh, that leads you or points you out to who is the true American and who is the true Moroccan. So, did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, indeed.
Islam Noble, is it safe to say from that point, is it safe to say that the true American or the Americans is true indeed the Anglo-Saxons then?
Yeah, the Americans, just looking back on their history, right? They came together as the Continental Congress, meaning there was people from different continents that formed a Congress. So you had French subjects, you had Spanish subjects, you had British subjects, right? All predominantly European, right? Spain is what's called now Europe, right? Um, all these European nations formed a Congress called the Continental Congress, and so that's what they are pretty much. They're, it's a lot of other nations that make up the essence of American. But
That would be that 6 nations. That would be the 6 nations that turned into the 13 nations.
that'll be that'll be all the 13 colonies and all that.
Yeah, the 13 colonies, Paul and Seth. All right, cool. I'm digging. I'm doing my research. Islam.
All right,
Peace.
so yeah.
I have the Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, and it says American, pertaining to the Western Hemisphere, or in a more restricted sense, to the United States.
Islam.
Just to point that out.
And even they couldn't be direct, because then we would have to say, where's Morocco in that Black's Law Dictionary? Because we know this ain't America. And if we follow the law, they should have somewhere in from Morocco, because they just generalized the heck out of that definition.
Right, and you also can't be claiming 2 separate jurisdictions too, saying that you're Moorish and American. Those are 2 separate types of government.
Islam.
Nowhere in the treaties either does it say Moorish American. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship was between Morocco and those citizens who became Americans from Europe.
Islam, yes. Cicero, did you have a point of interest?
Just a comment, just to continue on what we were talking about, to be redundant. Yes, when Noble Drew Ali said we're Moors born in America, Moroccans born in America, is simply emphasizing now that we come to that Moroccans is a jurisdiction within itself, and American is a jurisdiction within itself, and that us Moors, we've been born into the wrong jurisdiction. So just to call ourselves Moroccan is way more accurate than Moorish American, which is wrong right there. So yeah, that's it. Peace.
Islam.
Islam on that, Noble.
So are there any more questions or comments before we conclude this?
Can I be heard? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to get your opinion as far as how you feel about filing federal lawsuits in regards to ongoing situations that we already have.
All our lawsuits everything that we do in regards to taking someone to court will be in regards to the IC in accordance to the ICJ. So we
Because we
talking about
can't just go straight to the ICJ right now. Like situations we got going on right now, we can't just go straight to the ICJ.
oh yeah, we can petition the ICJ when we're ready to. Right now, like you said, not now. You know, the states have to prepare and put in the necessary requirements so that we fulfilling those requirements. Um, and petitioning the ICJ is one. Um, in which again that's one of the steps. So to take them to court, it's not a lot that must be done. You know, of course, you got to be a state, and to keep in mind that while we're decolonized, there's not a lot expected uh, from a colonized people. So the instructions, as far as taking them to court, even I'm not sure if anybody else has ever had this experience, but if you've ever tried to file a lawsuit within uh, the United States, sometimes you probably some of us may have used what is that Article 10, I believe, of the U.S. Constitution or something like that. But basically, I forgot what article it is. But basically, it's talk about silver and gold is the only de jure form of currency. And so I remember I used that trying to file a lawsuit against I forgot who I was filing against, but basically I end up not having to pay the fee because I put that on my paperwork, whatever article and section it was the Constitution. But my case ended up not being heard because I wasn't in a proper status. So some Moors actually get heard if they set themselves up. I wasn't set up a certain type of way in their system to be heard, but I was able to not to basically uh, get past a certain set of instructions based on their instructions. So their instructions say this, but when you surpass their instructions by actually following lawful instructions or so-called lawful instructions, like when I use that Constitution to not pay, it sounded good, but that's just a higher level of truth than that what they were at. I wasn't even supposed to enforce their Constitution, not as a Moor, right? So really it's just all about the tiers and the instruction of the tiers in which we're talking. So when we're talking about federal in itself, that has its own sphere of understanding. Actually, I'll probably make a video on a federal state um, and understanding all that type of stuff. So yeah, I'll make a video about that. But as far as us going to court to say that we are ready in this moment, no. But uh, as far as the instructions are not, let's just say, out of reach as far as having to go to court.
Okay, my question is basically in regards to situations I got going now, like ongoing. I had a similar situation as far as what you're saying with a federal lawsuit in the past. So what I'm asking is now that the statehood is established, what do you think as far as the outcome may be better as far as actually being an ascendant to the treaties for real within that lawsuit?
Yeah, yeah, because only states can take anybody to court. So being that we basically switch positions with the United States of America because they're acting as a de facto state or a corporation. We already know how they come in. Now we are states, and so only states can take another state to court. But once they find out they're not a state, that settles so much of that, and we handle the rest of what the case is about, right? Um, so as long as you can prove yourself to be a de jure state, then you can be heard and go to ICJ. And uh, the treaties basically, and again, as I mentioned earlier, some Moors who may not understand statehood say, how many cases have you beat, to try to see what competency level you're at. Um, excuse me. Okay, I think somebody just accidentally said something, but so uh, to prove that you can enforce a treaty happens in many measurements. You know, especially if you built with ANPAC and HURD or ANPAC as well. There are success stories, if you want to call it that, from exercising a treaty without having to go to court. So the treaty is definitely an enforcement as soon as you start a state, and in many ways. And we don't need a court case to prove that, but a treaty has a lot of instructions for us to follow and a lot of ways for us to exercise the treaty. So, but yeah, to answer the question though, yeah, as far as the state establishing a state, and I think a lot of confusion sometimes comes in when or not a lot of clarity, I should say, comes in when uh, the word recognition. Some of we send in our documents to the United Nations, and we don't hear anything back. We don't get anything, right? Well, when we talking about if we're even supposed to get anything back, no, we're not. Why? Because when we're using the exact terminology, the lawful terminology of the process, which is called recognition, right? Only state governments can recognize another state government. An organization like the United Nations can't recognize a state, but what they can do is accept the credentials of a state and put everybody else on notice of that state being who they say they are, right? As long as the treaties can be proven that it's you that's backing it on the landmass, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of confusion comes into where a lot of us are stuck in a paradigm, not saying you, but the Moors who are, sending information to the Secretary, Department of State. They looking to get it stamped and sitting back, all this types of stuff. Well, that's what you would expect in that status. That's what you expect to happen. But on an international level, you tell the world who you are as long as you're lawfully so, and people respect that, right? And of course, there's two sides of the coin. This is another story, but that's basically how it is. So, did that answer or bring any clarity on your behalf?
Yeah, somewhat. I think basically what I was asking was, just do you suggest we abandon the federal approach and just strictly focus on the ICJ?
Yeah, strictly the ICJ. You know, everything that they require as far as how we can be heard, et cetera, et cetera. And then as far as the federal sense, that system does have or that system does have avenues for us to learn from. But to handle our court or our us taking them to court would be strictly in correlation in accordance to the ICJ and their instructions and instructions of our treaties.
I feel you. I'm at a point to where now that the statehood is established and I never, can go into their venues expecting much remedy anyway. So
Mhm.
I just feel like blowing their records up. Federal lawsuit on everything. You know what I'm saying? Just blowing their records up.
Yeah, and which will happen. That most definitely will happen. That most definitely will happen because we won't be taking them to court just one time. It'll be at least twice, and not for the same thing either.
Could I add on with something real quick, Noble?
Yeah.
But it's coming from a different. I mean, it's not so much different, but it's coming from like the avenue with the proper persona sui juris. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like when I first got like a charge of where I had to to figure it out by myself or without a lawyer or anything like that, and I went into my studies. I came from this document, so it's probably the same thing everybody else was going through. And in the document, it kept on repeating, go get your bid bond, this, that, and the third, go get your bid bond. So I just kept going to the courthouse every day, and I was on the top, you feel me? And I was letting them know, like, I came from a de jure Moorish government, and they got me in here, and they won't let me leave without these papers. Because the clerk was playing with me, and she was like, what government? She was like, I said, I'm with the Moorish government, and they won't let me leave the courthouse until I get the papers that I'm looking for. She gave me the papers I was looking for. She was like, here. But not the papers I was looking for. She gave me something else. It wasn't even a bid bond. She gave me a piece of paper with a file number on it, and she said, take it back there to civil and give it to them, and they're gonna give you a piece of paper. And I'm like, my charge, I was locked up like a hundred something $1,000 bond or whatever. So when I took it back there, the lady, I gave it to her. She ran the file number, and she gave me this piece of paper, and that shit was called a certificate of liability. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, certificate of liability. I'm telling you, I just got hit with some shit she fought. So they tried to, you know what I'm saying? It was some bread for me to, you know what I'm saying, do my thing. And I'm reading it, and it says I'm being sued by the Department of Revenue, Ronald G. Penny, Secretary of State for Department of Revenue, in the amount of $10,000. I'm like, what? Like, so I went straight to the crib and got to it. I seen the nigga notices and everything. I seen him notices. I seen the judge notices. Seen the DA notices. The officers, you know what I'm saying? I seen everybody they notices. I pushed them through the administrative process. I told them in my document of fault, I believe, that I ain't even coming to court, you know what I'm saying, no more, because your silence is acquiescence, you feel me? So this nigga gotta come to court, you feel me? Like, y'all gotta respond back to me. I go down there, they don't got nothing in the record for me. Like, it's like they tried to haul complete ass, you feel me? Like, they don't got nothing in the record for me. So it's just been like that. You feel me? Like, it was just a lawsuit. It was just a lawsuit from this nigga, Ronald G. Penny. So that's how I bought the ass the first time. So after that, I just went straight into my studies. So with bro said, they did have something where I filed for a motion to go to the federal court or whatever, but and it's online. You can look it up. You feel me? But it's in my appellation, and like they said that being that I didn't take like my last step with the federal court, then I guess it's like in a sense, it was saying something like it's inactive or something like that. So that was my whole little John. You feel me? Like I feel like I could have really went in there and did that with them. I don't know, like since I was to the point to where like since they ain't fucking with me, they don't have no. Yeah, somebody said something.
Nah.
Okay, but yeah, that was that. You feel me? So like pushing forward, and I know how that thing played out. That's my whole mindset with how to handle their ass. Like I got papers on document. I mean, I got documents on file or whatever with different courthouses in North Carolina that I go to or whatever. But like other than that, me besides like them not fucking with me and all that, nah, they'll still lock me up. Even though if I got my papers on document, they don't lock me up before. You feel me? So like I mean my documents on file, like they'll still they pull me over and you know what I'm saying or whatever. They run my name or they run my MACD or whatever. I ain't gonna say they not gonna like fuck with me or take me to jail or whatever. Like they do that. You feel me? So I don't know, but I do know that if they do fuck with me, then I know that I probably take their ass through the administrative process until I know that like everything is taken care of to where I can move like how bro be talking about how he coming from because that's the only way that I see that's how it's supposed to go. I see that's how it's supposed to work. You feel me? Like after all the research and all the studying I done been doing and talking to this people, talking to that people. Like I know some people in some real high seats and they let me know like it's a lot of stuff that you gotta do to be able to move like this, you know what I'm saying? And how he talk, that, you feel me? Like the people he rock with, we know I could say names, but I don't say names. I don't drop his name. You know what I'm saying? But we know them motherfuckers. We know at least one of them, and he in hot seat right now, and they got some stuff going on. So he be letting me know, like, in the way he talk, he's so swift with that paperwork. Like, he's so swift with all that shit. Like, the way he talk, he real with that shit. He be telling me, like, it's a lot of shit you got to do to even be able to move like this. You know what I'm saying? You got to know all this shit that I'm talking about. You feel me? So, other than that, like, with you know what I'm saying, brother I kill, I see that's what we all got to do in unison to be able to move like that. You feel me? If we ain't going to be able to at least keep up with that shit, you know what I'm saying? Us moving together and us rocking out the way he said we supposed to rock out and linking up from state to state. Like, I've been talking that for a long time. I used to tell people all the time, like, if y'all think we about to shut some shit down like that, and these motherfuckers got a courthouse in every state, every city, every county, you know what I'm saying? Like, now we got to be able to move how they moving. They outside all the time, you feel me? They moving like that. That's motion they got going on every day, all day. But I yield the floor. I just wanted to share that with y'all though.
That's a good point. And we'll conclude after this statement. I do got to work early in the morning. So as far as the federal, right? We can stick with the basics. State is higher than federal. If you get just any international law book or any law book, you can see the state is higher than federal, right? So to operate on the federal level it's kind of like democracy. Not saying that's like democracy, but when we look at democracy, the United States, everybody thinks that democracy is bad just because how the United States use it. So now we think what democracy is, the word democracy is just all bad. But if you look at international law, you actually see that it takes on a different standpoint. and can actually be good and all types of stuff. So it's similar to the federal system, in which that, of course, state is higher than federal, right? But when we're talking about operating on the federal level, it's just like the United States. They got things that we can learn from, things we can utilize, plug and play with. And so when we talk about the federal is what the United States, like if you was to establish yourself like as Noble Drew did, right? And just as a lot of Moors are doing business or organization, set up a trust, put your ID in the United States trust, or the trust you got in the United States, put your plates in there so you can be good and operate cool, right? Your civil and criminal cases, all doing business to organizations, all coming to the organization, right? That's what's shrouding you, right? Or shrouded around you. But if you was to go the whole nine, that federal system will be the system that you would use for liberation in their system, in their system. But state is higher than federal, right? So it has its avenues and levels and can even be used as a form of liberation depending on your status and what you're doing. But if we talk about the highest tier dealing with sovereignty and independence, is strictly state, the ICJ, etc., ICC, and all that. So it's been a good lengthy class, and I appreciate all of you for attending and building with Meru, um, and hope to see you again. I will be posting information on when the next study session is for it's an open forum. Not all of our study sessions are open forum. Some of our sessions are for internal affairs. Um, but I will be posting information on when the next meeting will be. All right. And with that, I conclude this study session. And
Peace.
may Allah bless you all. Peace.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.
Peace.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.
No.